I'm going to take about 25 minutes today to introduce a model and a framework for understanding our emotions and connecting with our breath that for me has been transformative in the way that I understand the world and the way that I navigate the world and the way that I experience my life. And it helps me to show up in a way where I can connect with myself and connect with my heart, live from my heart, and to let my emotions fuel and power me and take me to the next level. So first off, just to check in, knowing that these are some wild times. This is my first unconference event. It's good to see where people are joining us from. So go ahead and you can type in if you want where you're joining from, probably some people from around the world. But I think that the ability to navigate stress is more important now than ever because there's so much happening in the collective consciousness. There's so much happening in the world at large. And if seen as an opportunity to slow down, reflect, to bring awareness to what's here, what's in our field. And when I say the word field, I just mean our emotional body. So I might say some terms that seem a bit unfamiliar, but I'll try to circle back and always catch people up. Things like the breath and breath work can be invaluable. So I want to go ahead and read a quote from Jeff Foster's The Way of Rest. I'm going to be pulling up a few resources over the course of this talk. This one, The Way of Rest, if you don't already have it, it's a beautiful text to help connect with your heart, and I highly recommend it. So I'll just go ahead and read this passage. Healing, trust the process. Sometimes you have to commit to feeling worse in order to feel better. Sometimes you have to lose the hope of ever getting better, then you start to feel better. Sometimes healing involves staying very present as powerful waves of energy move in the body. Sometimes the body shakes, convulses, shivers, aches, sweats, burns as it rids itself of toxins, releases bound up tension. The mind says, I'm getting worse. The heart knows you're okay. True healing is not the removal of surface symptoms, but courage and trust of the body in connection with the breath, and knowing that symptoms may intensify before they disappear, and they may never disappear. Yet you may fall in love with yourself as you are, despite the future. And you may drop to your knees in gratitude, for you have been given another day on this precious earth. Maybe getting worse was the best thing that ever happened to you, because you've never sensed the presence of love so clearly, and your path has never been more obvious, and you've never felt so alive. So just reading those words just gives me goosebumps. And I want to start from the place in this talk. I know when you read through the list of speakers, it says, CEO of AuraLab, and I don't want to, start from that place. I want to start as a person, as an individual in this world who has experienced a lot of struggle, who's experienced a lot of suffering, losing a precious family member, financial struggles, uncertainty, chronic health conditions. When I was finishing up my PhD, I was diagnosed with this ear condition that totally rocked my quality of life. And it's an ear condition. So when you think about the ear, it's inside of you. And so you can't really get away from these sounds if they're rocking your world in a certain way. And what happened to me was I would want to talk to my sister and connect with loved ones. And suddenly I was getting this popping and these sounds inside my head and hearing the sound of my breathing amplified. And so my body started to send up all these fear signals, all these warning signals. So you can imagine I'm going to speak with my sister, going to speak with loved ones, and my body's saying, danger, fear, run away. So I immediately was able to see that there's a disconnect between what my emotional body was telling me and these situations that previously for me were the quintessential embodiment of just love and feeling good. So in hindsight, I recognize now that that's a part of the awakening process, and take that to mean, whatever you want. But when I come at it right now, pragmatically, I'm just going to say that it means that I can recognize that there's an emotion that comes up, and that emotion is not who I am. That emotion does not define me, but I'm an awareness that can hold that emotion. And another aspect of this is knowing that a thought can arise and the thought can be there, and I'm not fundamentally what that thought is. So for any of us who've done things like inner child work or who have recognized some of our emotional and behavioral patterns, we can start to understand ourselves with a level of meta awareness where we can feel this pattern is here, it keeps coming up, and it's not me. And I can bring love to it. And then you can start to create this new kind of parent-child relationship. And so I want to do a few things over this talk today. First, I want to just give us a new framework to think about our emotions and our emotional body. And then I want to give some tools so that we can embrace our emotional body in a new way. So I want everyone to get comfortable. This is going to be interactive, so I hope that you're okay with that. So go ahead and sit up straight, get cozy in the chair, place one hand on the chest and place another hand on the belly. Just notice how your breath is moving without trying to change it. Is it shallow? Is it deep? Is it quick? Is it slow? Notice any feeling of tingling or aliveness in the body. Noticing any thoughts that are here, just letting them be here. Letting the eyes gently drift closed for a moment. I'll still be here on the screen. So we're just going to do a scan and just feel what's here in the body right now. So the first thing that I would like to impart would be a practice of meeting what's present in our body with the breath, rather than immediately meeting what's present in the body with any idea that something should change, without meeting it with ideas of this is a good feeling or a bad feeling, or this is right or this is wrong, and to meet the thoughts in our mind with a similar perspective. And the most effective way that I found to do this is simply to come back to the breath. And the breath that we're going to invoke for the first part of this is going to be a deep belly breath. So I'd like for you, on the hand that's on your belly, to just breathe deeply into that hand in a way that as you're breathing, that hand rises. And I can kind of stand up and demonstrate here. So I'm taking a deep breath in to the belly area, and then just relaxing on the exhale. And that's a key, because sometimes we take a deep breath in and then we feel like we have to push it out or force it out. But if you think about naturally the function of the diaphragm, the muscle is working. As we open up the lungs, you can think about the lungs as a balloon. And as we breathe in deeply, we're filling up that balloon. And then the exhale can simply be a relaxation as gravity is doing the work of moving that air back out of our lungs. So we'll take another deep breath into the belly area, in and relaxing on the exhale. Take a deep breath in and relaxing on the exhale. And there's research that shows that breathing at about 5.5 breaths per minute is going to maximize what's called our heart rate variability. And that's a measure of how much does your heart rate change in response to the movement of your breath. When oxygen flows into our lungs and there's a lot of fuel available for our bodies, then our hearts should speed up in that moment to gather that new energy and distribute it throughout our bodies. And as we exhale and that oxygen is no longer available, then our heart should slow down and take a rest. But what can happen is that if we're not engaged in deep relaxation in our bodies, our heart rate variability is low. And that's actually a bad thing, because it means that the heart never knows when to take a break. So if we take a deep breath in, and this time, put a hand actually on your pulse here. So one hand on your belly and another hand on your pulse. For some of you, this may be your first time experiencing this, and it's pretty fascinating. So as you're breathing in slowly, and I'll let you do this at your own pace now, take a deep breath into the belly area and just pay particular attention to the speed at which your pulse is moving. And you should notice a slight rise and a slight fall. This in and of itself can be a powerful meditation, because when we think about the process of meditation, some people think that we're supposed to bring the full volition of our trying, doing selves to say, oh, there's a thought, that wasn't right. Oh my God, am I doing this wrong? Am I sitting up straight? That it's supposed to be this kind of doing activity, when in actuality, we just want an object that's enough to just hold the attention of the conscious mind in our awareness. So when we breathe and simply become aware of the pulse, we're becoming aware of our body simultaneously. So breathing, bring awareness to the pulse. And now what I want you to do is consciously evoke in your mind what is it like to feel stress? And like, whoa, you guys go big. You know, it's Friday evening, Robert. I thought that we were just going to relax together. But like, really think about this for a moment. Like, what happens when you get a little stressed out? Now, one thing that's particularly fascinating, there was this research that was conducted in 1990, a paper, Specific Respiratory Patterns Distinguish Among Basic Human Emotions. And what these researchers found was that when people were asked to invoke these different emotions, their respiratory patterns actually changed. So think about this for a moment. If you become stressed out, how much you breathe. And now I want you to think about this. If you become angry, how much you breathe. So I'll give a little clue right here. So if you become upset and you become angry, screw that guy, right? It's a kind of like deep inhalation, deep exhalation. And now think about sadness. How much you breathe when you're sad? Kind of like a, you know, like kind of weeping, like. So there's these sharp pauses, these sharp spikes of activity, and then release. And it's all going to be, you know, slightly different across different individuals. But what was really fascinating about this research is that it showed that there was distinct respiratory functionality that was associated with different emotions. Now, what was even more interesting is a paper from 2017, Functional Correlates Between Breathing and Emotional States. So this research starts to show that if you breathe in a different way, you can evoke a different emotional state. So you can imagine if I ask you to breathe in a way that's evoking, what's that? That's a kind of anger, that's intensity. And I want to do away with that word anger right now. And I just want to say sympathetic activation. So I want to introduce some words into our vocabulary. Sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system. When I breathe in this way, I'm engaging what's known as conscious connected breathing. Conscious connected breathing is the basis of some different forms of breathing, including rebirthing breath work. You've maybe heard of holotropic breath work, shamanic breath work. There's this book called The Presence Process, which I deeply recommend. This is by Michael Brown, and he recommends a daily conscious connected breathwork practice of 15 minutes in the morning every day and 15 minutes in the evening, and that's what I invoke. And if you think about, so that, and by that, that's what I invoke, I just mean that's what I do. And so if you think about conscious connected breathing, when you have this kind of fast pace, what we're doing here, and there's actually research around this, let me remember the name of that paper. So Rebirthing Activation of the Autonomic Nervous System was published in 2018, where they actually did an evaluation of people while they were doing this kind of conscious connected breathing. And what they found was it was sympathetic nervous system activation. So you're consciously going into fight or flight, and that starts to give access to some trapped emotions in the body. Because for the longest time, I was kind of confused because there's deep, slow breathing. So there's a way of slowing down the breath as a way of calming the body. And then there's other breath practices that activate the breath as a way of moving emotions. And so I thought, how is it that both of these can be healing? And then that triggered a whole line of thinking around, well, if you look at our base thoughts that we have throughout the day, and I talked earlier about the inner child, we're pretty much running on a baseline program from the moment that we open our eyes of getting out of bed, putting on the shoes, getting a drink of water, and, you know, whatever it is, you know, we're probably not putting on our shoes these days because we're not going too far. But we've got our basic set routines and we've got our ways of responding. And, you know, it might be jealousy. It could be that you get excited when you see fire trucks because when you were a kid, you really wanted to be a fireman or something of that nature. There's all different ways that we are unique in our emotional bodies. But the important thing here is to recognize that we each have a very unique emotional configuration, meaning that something that bothers someone else isn't necessarily going to bother us, and that something that bothers us might not necessarily bother someone else. And so when we breathe deeply in this, and I'll have us do it together as a group in a second, what we're doing is we're actually consciously going into fight or flight. And again, I'm not using the word anger because I don't want to invoke any kind of negative connotation. So the sympathetic nervous system is highly important because the sympathetic nervous system is what we need to actually go out and move through the world. It gets us up and out of bed. It's highly involved with our motivation, to say the least. And so what happens when we consciously invoke our sympathetic nervous system, if there's emotional states that we experience as a child, our baseline level of awareness and our baseline state of being might not actually give us access to those emotional states. It might feel unsafe and it might feel very foreign. So one way to actually notice that we're moving into new spaces in our life and that we're starting to advance, and just like the Jeff Foster quote that I read earlier, where he said, sometimes you have to commit to feeling worse in order to feel better. One of the surest signs is that you start to experience new things. You start to feel new emotions. You start to have new life experiences. And so before we go into this breath practice together, what I want to share is that having something come up in your emotional body that feels like, oh, this is a little unsettling, or, oh, I'm not sure I've really felt this in a while, isn't a sign that you're off course. It's just a sign that you're tapping into something. And so that's one thing, if you take anything away from this 25-minute share here, it's that moving into your emotional body and emotional integration doesn't necessarily always have to feel good. In fact, oftentimes when we're present with what is, if we sit down to meditate, we're going to feel worse before we feel better because we've been avoiding our emotional body for so long. So what I'm going to have us do now is invoke deep, slow breaths at a pace. And so we're going to breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. You might get just a little lightheaded. If you do, you can slow down. You might experience tingling in your body. If you do, that's okay. You might get a little bit of fogginess and realize like, oh, it's harder to hold conceptual thought in my mind. That's totally fine. So we're just going to do this shortly just so that you can have the experience in your body of what this feels like and to know that this is entirely safe. Okay, so everyone seated comfortably in your chair, sitting up with your spine nice and straight. So we're going to go ahead and invoke this deep breathing practice together. And this is paced breathing. And again, this is at the core of holotropic breath work, shamanic breath work, rebirthing breath work. And here we go. So I'm going to have you take a deep breath in and out, in, out, in, out. Continue at this pace. In, out, in, out. In, you can breathe into the chest, out, or into the belly. In, out. And relax. That was just a taste. Already you're going to start to notice your body heating up and your pop guard may move. So what we're doing there is activating the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system. So it's like we're a little bit more ready to get into a brawl at this point. Now, another resource that I'm going to offer up here is this book called The Miracle of Breath. This is a fantastic book. I'm going to hold it still instead of waving it around. So there you go. The Miracle of Breath is a fantastic resource on just basic breathing techniques to help you get into your body, to help shift emotions when they arise. So if you're ever feeling overwhelmed and overloaded, I highly recommend that rather than starting simply from a place of, okay, I just need to be calm, I just need to relax. I mean, and it's good. We can use that kind of self-talk and positive self-talk. I certainly encourage over negative self-talk, certainly. But what I really also want to endorse, because this isn't spoken to as much with Western mindfulness, is this idea of let's really utilize the full capacity of our body. And sometimes what we're feeling is frustration and anger, and we're not willing to let that come through. And the thing is that gets in the way of us feeling into our personal power, which is also connected to our sexuality, which is connected to our creative life force. And you can hear even in the power that's coming through my voice, just doing a little bit of that deep breathing practice, I have a little bit more energy that I'm transmitting now. And so what I want to do is have all of us collectively do a practice from the Miracle of Breath that's just going to bring us up one step higher. And this is particularly useful if you have an emotion trapped in the body, particularly like a tightness in the chest and anxiety. What I want to have us do is just take your hands and squeeze them. You can do this with a stress ball. You can do this with a rolled up towel. You can do this with socks. You can do this with your clothes. So I'm going to use this cardigan right now. So getting comfy in the chair and just squeeze the hands. And we're going to invoke this slightly more intense breath. But I don't want you to go there right away. What I want you to do is to notice the feeling in your hands and then notice the sensation anywhere else in your body. What I want you to do is to start to notice is you squeeze a little harder, a slight sense of burning in the hands, almost as though, like if you like to go to the gym or run or exercise, it's kind of that feeling of like you're exerting yourself, but it feels good. So just notice that. Start to squeeze a little harder. And then what I want you to do is just notice how as we squeeze a little harder, the breath will want to move a little deeper. So what we're doing here is we can actually invoke a heightened energetic state in our body that will then stair step in parallel with the heightened sensation of the breath. So now invoke a deeper breath. And then squeeze the hands a little tighter. Now, this is the kind of technique that would be used by warriors before going into battle. So this kind of squeeze and then intensifying of the breath, this is the kind of thing where I'll personally invoke this if I'm about to go and give a talk. I was with an angel investor. We were out on his back porch. Everything was going well for the previous few days. And suddenly everything just seemed like it was going down the tank. He walked out of the room. I started to do this technique. And within 5 minutes, I totally flushed out all the feeling of concern in my body. So this one is powerful. The next level of this one, if you're still with me, if you're still squeezing, and for women or those who identify as women in the group, if you pound on the upper chest, generally, for men, if you're just like pounding right here on the chest. So the next level of where you can take this one eventually is to squeeze and then actually do a pounding on the chest. And then this is like, the full, like souped up Tesla Ferrari version of this, where if we do a and actually stick out the tongue, pushing out the breath, and then let the sound come out. And then we'll do this one more time for a count of 3. Deep breath in. And you can vary the speed at which you're doing the pounding. You can vary the tightness with which you're holding and squeezing your hands. So you can just close your eyes and scan your body right now. Like, I don't have to tell you about the effect of this practice. You can feel it. Like, do you feel that tingling? Do you feel that sense of aliveness? Do you feel that sense of personal power? I see it. I thought I saw a head shake. No, but I think that's just feeling the energy in the body. So this is a practice. For example, I was working as a chief innovation officer at University of Michigan, and I would get into an elevator and go up and have a meeting. I'd get into an elevator and go down and I have another meeting. One thing I love to do, elevator doors would close, and you can kind of imagine I'm there and I'm, just in my suit or something. Elevator door closes, ding, I'm there alone. And then, and I literally would just, for the time that I'd be going up and down in the elevator, this practice for, maybe here, I just kind of lost the video for a second. I'd be doing this practice for 30 seconds and then I'd center myself, elevator doors open, and I walk out, and I'm there, I'm present, and I've moved the energy through my body. And so again, it's this idea of we don't need to be afraid of intense energy as it comes up, to know that excitement and fear are so close to one another. And so if you feel tightness that's occurring, just be like, what if this is excitement? And then if you have to step out of a room, just say, excuse me, do the chest pound. Otherwise, if you just want to stay in the room, literally I've done this where I'll be sitting with someone at a table. Beneath the table, I'll notice I start to get a little nervous. I'll just start to squeeze the hands and just start to pull that anxiousness down and into the hands. That's another sort of visualization that we can do with this technique, is to imagine and envision the intensity in our body flowing into our hands. And if we want to go so far, to imagine that we are a dragon in that moment and just breathe out. And so I guess, this wouldn't be when I'm sitting with someone at a table. This might be when I, step out into the other room or something. As we breathe out, breathe fire all over everything. And it's kind of like, if we're thinking about Western, we're going to hug a tree and love and light mindfulness. It might be like, but Robert, should we really breathe fire on things? It's like, hell yeah, breathe fire all over everything. Show up fully, like express that if that's what wants to come through. And so there are times when I'll squeeze the hands, get into the breath, breathing out, and then literally feel like I'm blowing out fire from my breath and my hands. And this practice in and of itself helps to deeply, deeply reintegrate emotion back into the body. And there's other practices like just doing a dance party. I love to do that every morning. But when you're in a pinch and you want to rapidly shift emotion, this is a practice that I really enjoy. And so I want to make sure that I hit both sympathetic activation and parasympathetic activation today, because both can be highly useful and both are really beneficial in terms of regulating our emotional body. And this is something that I want to make sure that I impart because I haven't really seen this touched upon anywhere else. But if you think about the emotional conditioning that we've inherited, either our ancestors, our school systems, our friends, the societal conditioning that we get, oftentimes we think that we want to transcend these levels of conditioning that are often associated with fear and the sense of identification with like a little me, which can evoke a victim identity. So what I would like to impart is the sense that when we're running in what you might call our default mode, that also relates to just our default breath. So any moment that we just become aware of how we're breathing and we start to take deep breaths, if we start to invoke conscious connected breathing, or if we slow down and we breathe into our belly and we invoke deep slow breathing, the very act of breathing in a conscious way starts to pull us out of our conditioned patterns. Because some people think, it's got to happen through therapy. Other people think, it's got to happen through these just sitting and meditating modalities and just bring awareness to thoughts. I like to propose something that people often don't speak about, which is just changing the breath. And if you think about something like getting in water, if you get into water that's pretty close to your body temperature, it's comfortable, right? So it's kind of what I'm talking about here. If you get into water that's really hot, like a hot tub, that's going to activate you in a certain way. If you get into water that's ice bath, that's going to activate you in a different way. So the breath can have the same function. Now let's talk about the relaxing function of the breath. And also I'll quickly share, there's technology that I'm bringing into the world with my business partner, Ben Collins. This app is called Breathscape. And this helps to support deep, slow breathing. And so the app is available on the App Store. You can download it today. So just type in Breathscape or Breathscape Deep Breathing. What this app does is it actually brings awareness to the breath by turning breath into music. And so quickly, I'll just show you. If I put the phone here and I unpause it, I breathe in, breathe out, breathe in. The phone now is assessing my breath. So I just hit in the lower right-hand corner, global sync. And this is now moving in an automated, very slow pattern. So it's going to produce a deep, slow breathing. So I invite you all now to synchronize your breath with the movement of this circle for the last minute of our time here together. So if you download this app, you'll be able to experience global synchronized breathing experiences with others around the world. And this app will also help you to move into deep, slow breathing experiences whereby you'll be deeply connected with your body and you'll gain awareness of your breath, because that's the loop that's so important to activate in ourselves, just a simple returning to breath awareness. And once we do, we can then start to say, is this a moment to really activate myself? Or is this a moment to do some deep, slow breathing? So hand on your belly, and we'll take a deep breath in. Excellent. Exhaling now. Take one more deep, slow breath in. And exhaling now. So that 30 minutes flew by, everyone. I want to thank you for showing up today. Thank you for showing up for yourselves. It's really such a profound time to be alive, and it can be a time for radical personal growth. So I just appreciate all of you who are on this call today. I feel your energy, and feel free to reach out to me, robert@auralab.io. I'll leave that in the chat real quick, and then we got to move on to the next speaker. So thank you all so much. Lab.io, and I'm signing off.